All right, ladies and gentlemen, time once again for the only coast to coast radio show all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh, is here with two data governance legends, folks. The whole data governance industry hinges on the ideas and the evangelism of these guys, more or less. I mean, there are other people too, but these are the first two guys I heard talking about it. I'm talking years ago, like 15, 20 years ago, these gentlemen were pushing the importance of governing data. And we've covered the show on DM radio many times. I remember asking the question, can data be governed or only people? Of course, it's people who have to be governed, right? I mean, data is just sitting there in a database somewhere. So what are you governing? You're governing access. And historically, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, it was really hard to pull this off. So you'd have data governance policies, you'd have a manual, you would have a rule book of some kind, and a few people, responsible people would read it, and a number of people would even abide by these rules. But in the last 10 years or so, it really has taken off. Data catalogs played a part in that. Master data management goes back 20 years or more. So these were other trend lines that were moving data forward in the enterprise. But in the last 10 years, especially in the last 5 years, it's become very prominent. And now with AI everywhere, of course, it's extremely important because if you had garbage in, garbage out with traditional data, you've got garbage in, garbage X 1,000 with AI, especially with hallucinations and automations gone wrong. And there are plenty of those out there. So I decided to have a show here with these two gentlemen. We've got Bob Seiner of Kick Consulting and the inimitable John Ladley on the line with us. And I'll start with Bob Seiner. So, Bob, you got a new book. What is it? Something like Data Governance Cubed or something? What is it again?
Data Catalyst cubed.
There you go.
You know,
Data.
John and I think John will want to talk about this as well, but there's a message that's out there that data governance is just failing the way that people are implementing it. And people are thinking actually that the term data governance is almost too scary of a term to use, and that we should be enabling people to use data. And the new book is actually calling BS on that. It's saying that no, we don't want data governance as an enabler is too passive, but data governance as a catalyst to actually make things happen, to spark innovation, to spark acceleration with your AI initiatives in your organization. The book is called The Data Catalyst Cubed with the number three in the corner. And the reason is that it's all really about an equation that you can really use data as a catalyst if you multiply data governance, non-invasive data governance, of course, my favorite subject. You multiply that by change management. So if we can't, you were talking about it really being people governance, not data governance. If we're going
Right.
to get people to change their behavior, then formal change management, effective change management needs to be a part of it. And other people are also talking about data literacy as playing an important role. I'm using the word data fluency as a way to get people to become fluent in data, just not be able to read data, be able to ask good, valid questions around data. So the
Mm.
catalyst cubed is the equation data governance multiplied by the effect of change management, multiplied by the effect of what I'm calling fluency in data. And I think it's a new way of kind of positioning the whole idea of governance being this evil thing that we're trying to implement.
Right, or overbearing. I mean, I really do love that you use this term catalyst because people understand a catalyst. What is a catalyst? A catalyst is someone or something that makes things happen.
Right.
And a catalyst is someone who comes along and takes situation A and somehow transforms it into situation B,
hmm
basically. So you're
hmm
changing something like an alchemist would essentially. And the fluency, of course, that matters. But the change management, I really like the focus on that. And I'll throw this back over to you for a second, Bob, then we'll bring John in. But change management is really important right now with the number of workflows disrupted by AI. Although there are some interesting observations, they said AI would do things faster and I'd have more time, and you wind up doing more work because of AI. So it's like, well, sometimes these presumptions don't really kind of pan out in the real world. But change management is really, really important right now, and data is the catalyst to using AI effectively, right, Bob?
It is. And so I'm glad that you recognize that because I could say it pretty much in a nutshell. that if you don't change people's behavior associated with how they define, produce, and use data, and that doesn't mean hitting them over the head with a stick. It just means getting them to do things in the best interest of the organization. You're not going to have effective data governance without effective change management.
Hmm.
And so I just think that the two, every day I'm reading more and more about how people are kind of jumping on that same train and saying that, what, we need to change people's behavior in order to get governance to be accepted within the organization.
Yeah. And with that, I'll bring in John Ladley, our esteemed data governance analyst. And you've been evangelizing this for 20 plus years. You've seen on the front
Yeah,
lines what
yeah.
happens when you don't have data governance. And what happens is multiple versions of the truth, arguments over who's
Right.
right,
Yeah.
all kinds of bad things happen, right, John?
Yeah. And that's where another way to look at this. The word catalyst is suitable here to just riff off of what Bob said. In that a catalyst is an element necessary for a chemical reaction to take place, right?
Hmm.
It's required. That's it's
Mm,
required for something to
good point.
successfully happen.
Right.
All right. Now, there's been so we we repeatedly talk about data governance being necessary if you're going to treat data as an asset and all this and those are all good metaphors or similes or something like that. But the real heart of this and what has led to the expectations being too high, what I frankly think is data governance has been oversold
Hmm.
by
Interesting.
obviously firms that have an interest in selling their products and services and things like that is when you look at it as that it must be there. All right. It is in the context of it must be there the same way any other complicated system has a set of guidelines or standards or controls or anything. We were talking our pre-show banter here. We were talking about airplanes because I'm a flight instructor. Well, aviation lives on what we would define as governance, but you don't see it. There's not a governance poster in every cockpit, cheering, join the gated governance team today and we'll have cookies. I mean, you don't see any of that stuff. It's in the air you're breathing. It's in there, but you don't see it.
Right.
Um, so it is a catalyst. But the other thing, and this is where the change stuff gets hard, we make it way bigger than it should be.
Hmm.
It should disappear. It should be like the governance in the cockpit. It should be like the governance that a chief financial officer works under, or the governance that a CEO works under, because governance is in that job description for a CEO. It's just part of the atmosphere. It's in the room. It should be necessary. It's required for the reaction to happen for good
Right.
use of your data resources. Um, but the other aspect of this, which can, kind of straddle our theme here, is it should be over time excruciatingly boring and dull. All right? I mean, think about it. Um, uh, uh, everyone, when someone says to me, I would love a career in data governance, John, would you mentor me? I'd say, well, okay. Would you also consider a sale? I'm sorry. Would you consider a career in selling vacuum cleaners door to door? Okay,
We had
because
one of those recently, by
Wow.
the way.
yeah,
They
but
still
because
Wow.
exist.
Is
well,
that all? Is that all I've been doing all these years?
Selling
okay,
vacuum cleaners.
now, Bob, this is that's a great question. Is because you can have as practitioners of many decades, you and I together combined experience is too long. All right, I'm not going to give that number out in public. Um, but when you think about it, um, do you want, do you want to have this existential moment that says, gee, what I'm doing is long term really boring and won't even be mentioned at a cocktail party? Well, the fact is that if that is what happens, we're successful.
Yeah.
I've always said that if you consider if you consider data governance a game, we've all won the game when it just becomes embedded in what people do already. I mean, it
Business
doesn't
as
have to
Right.
be
usual.
viewed as something that is over and above
Right.
what people are presently doing. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the non-invasive nature, but if you start with the premise of people are already governing. You know what? There's people in your organization defining, producing, and using data as part of their job. If they're held accountable for how they define and produce and use data, they're already being held accountable for how they use the data, or at least you better hope that they are, right?
Mhm.
It's just as John was saying, you have to build it in to what people do. It's data governance really becomes most effective when nobody even knows that they're doing it.
Well, you reminded me of a thought I had as we were beginning the conversation, and this is it's part and parcel to trying to understand the industry and the needs apart from particular vendors and their products. And my buddy Mark Madsen had a great, he's such a smart guy. He has all these great observations. He goes,
Yeah,
yeah, that you're viewing it through the lens of a software company trying to sell products, which is different from the challenges that organizations have. And of course,
right.
software companies get together and they try to align and figure out what's the right messaging, what's the use case. That's all
Mhm.
true. But I'll throw this over to John first and then Bob. Data governance per se is not a product. It's a set of processes and protocols and so forth around being responsible with data. What do you think, John?
I use the word, it is a relatively, it's considered new. It's not new, but it's a new business capability required in the 21st century. And I use the word capability with great deliberation because a capability is a what, not a how.
Mm-hmm.
I can
Oh,
do
yeah.
one of the most successful governance efforts I ever had. We came up with a list of metrics, definitions, and critical data elements for a very critical business situation where it was fix some things or go out of business, right? And all of the output for all of that went into a three-ring binder. And I did that in 2008. Okay, it wasn't a primitive. It wasn't the 70s or the 80s. In 2008, okay, we put a three-ring binder. We made 500 of them and put them on every desk in an organization that was having terrific problems with. They were highly regulated, and that did it. And the technology is separate. Now, you did ask me a specific question, Eric, and I apologize, but I just went off on
That's all
this
right.
thing. What's your question again? I want to specifically answer that before we turn it
Well,
over to.
data governance per se is not a product.
No, it's a capability. It
Right.
is a capability. It's a what. All right.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm talking to a CEO or an executive, when I do work these days, I work for boards and executive teams. And when I talk to them, they all want to know this essential question everyone always asks, which is, what's it look like? And I immediately go, what does auditing look like? And they go,
That's a good
well,
answer.
someone comes in and makes sure that we're following the rules. I went, yeah, that's what
There
it
you go.
looks like. Now to Bob's point, they'll say, and I've had CEOs say this. In fact, years ago, Kelly O'Neill, another,
San Francisco
I'll say,
Partners.
yeah, talking head in our industry. Um, and I asked a bunch of CEOs some questions, and then we asked, well, does your organization do this? And they all said, well, of course we do. And the answer, and what the question we asked them in business terms was, do you govern your data? And they all assumed they did because why the heck wouldn't you?
Right.
It's so important. But then you tell them, but you don't do that. They go, what, you mean we don't have standards or rules or even decision rights? Who can make a call with what? I go, no, no. And I said, you don't have this capability at all because you have, and I'm going to have a guest on my podcast here in a few weeks, a real, honest to gosh CEO
Ooh.
who cannot spell IBM. Okay, by admission. All right, that's not his job. All right, his job is to run a big company, like big company. We're going to be it's a big company guy, not a little guy. It's not this LinkedIn self-declared CEO stuff we read all the time. This is like $10 billion. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, I go, okay, well, so what about data? He says, oh, I don't worry about data. I said, I got my team. I go, what team? You know, my team. I said, they're the ones down the hall when they got spreadsheets and they get data and you ask them for something and they come back in a day with a report or something. He goes, yeah, that's my team. He said, I got data management. I got that. I said, that's your data management. I said, how do you know it's right? Oh, well, they wouldn't give me anything wrong. And then I said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? Yeah, at that point in time. So what we're really dealing with here, it's a capability to answer your question specifically. And we're getting near the break here, right?
Yep.
It's a capability, but it's a capability that seems abstract to leadership. And we can riff after the break on this concept of fluency. I have other words for it. But they're polite words. Don't laugh, Bob. Where there's some gaps here that we can, move things along with. I hope
Hmm.
I ended a sentence with a preposition, but
That's
on
okay.
that,
You're
back to
never
you,
supposed to use a
our
preposition in a
illustrious
sentence, though.
host.
That's right. We got about a minute left, and I'll just kind of comment on what these gentlemen have both said here. It is true. I love the term capability, and it's an important capability. And as you suggested, it needs to happen. One of my other consultant pals years ago, Michael Haston, actually has the same birthday as me, a very, very smart guy. He said something one day that really struck me. He said, look, in any large organization, if there is something that must happen, it is happening. You may not know how it's happening or where it's happening or who's doing it or how they're doing it, but it is happening. And so there is some governance that does happen, but it's probably scattered across the organization. But when we come
Can
back,
we can we
we'll,
pick up on this when we come
yeah,
back? Because I'd
we
love to chime in on that for sure.
Sure, sure, sure. And it gets to something that Bob had been talking about before, which is that you are already doing things. There are already processes in
Yep.
place. And what do people like? Everyone likes to be commended, right? Who doesn't like to be commended? You go in and you look and see where people are doing right. Say, yes, that is correct. You are doing, yes, that's correct. And then slowly you work towards the, not as correct in as polite a way as possible. But don't touch that dial, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, a lively show already with Bob Seiner of Kick Consulting and John Ladley, dialing in from America. This not Central America, but
Central
Central
America.
United States America, the
Buenos
heartland,
dias.
the
Buenos
heartland.
dias, El Hosto.
Don't go down to
No,
Puerto Vallarta right now. I'll say that.
I'm
Be careful. Things are going
o-
a little bit hot down
outside
there.
of out of beautiful St. Louis, Missouri. I live in Missouri wine country where all the great data minds live.
There you go. And the
So
big arch. It's
But they
beautiful. It's good.
originated in the Pittsburgh area because that's where Eric is, and I am in John, where
And
your humble beginnings. So,
the guy
yeah.
over this shoulder right here, that's Mark Cooper lived in Pittsburgh too.
That's
So
So
there we go. That's where all the
yes,
brain trust
Stillers.
is.
That's right. The Stillers.
Stillers and sandwiches, you bet.
These guys going downtown, down
Yinzer,
Donsies, Stillers.
Yinzers.
They
That's it,
closed
man.
the O, so
Uh,
we can't even do that anymore. So
that's funny. Well, let's get back to actual data governance. I'll throw it over to Bob Seiner, who has put forth many of these ideas, and I really like this point you make about the fact that people are already doing good things, so you don't have to come in. No one likes to be told they're doing the wrong thing. No one likes to get their wrist. No one. A few people might like to get their wrist slapped. I'm not one of them. I can tell you that. It's not my thing. I don't like wrist slappers. I'm like, all right, man, let me just do it my way. But Bob, you make a good point that it's already happening. So focus on what you're doing well and build on that, right?
well, when I speak often at diversity conferences and different conferences, and I used to start my presentation by asking by show of hands, how many of your organizations are governing your data? And you'd get a few hands go up. Nobody would emphatically wave their hand. Yeah, we're governing our data. I said, okay, everybody put your hands down. Say, okay, I'm going to ask that question again, and I want everybody to raise their hand. And they said, okay, well, Bob has asked us to raise our hand. So, okay, how many of your organizations are governing your data? So everybody goes, yeah, we're governing our data. I said, look around you. The fact is, you already are governing. IT is already governing the use of information technology. HR is already governing the human resource aspect of your business. Facility management is governing that. Risk, audit, as John said. Those are already governing functions. Okay, so
Hmm.
we don't need to introduce the governance of data as being anything different than that. And so you don't think about audit every day. At least most people don't think about audit every day. You don't think about, the human assets of your organization, but they all need to be governed. So if we don't start with the premise of we're already governing, we're going to introduce this to the organization as something that's new, I think we're making a big mistake if we do that. We just say, look, we're already governing. We can do it more formally. We can do it more effectively. I define the term data governance to be the execution and enforcement of authority over the management of data.
Hmm.
Probably even a more important definition is my definition of stewardship, which is formalized accountability. We can go around with a lot of informal accountability, informal decision making. John, you mentioned the gentleman that said they wouldn't give me anything wrong. He just doesn't know what is actually going on in his part of the organization. I'm sure the people that are working for him are doing the best that they can.
Right?
But if we don't put any formality around the foundation of how the data is defined, how it's being produced, and most importantly, how it's being used, we're making a big mistake. So it is, you said it's a capability. It's kind of more like a discipline. When we get in our cars and we drive down the road, here in the US, we drive on the right side of the road. At least you're supposed to drive on the right side of the road. If you drive on the left side of the road, you're going to get in trouble for that. It's just built into what we do.
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, some things are common practice, some things are not common practice. We need to make the things that are not common practice, that need to be common practice, we need to just embed it into what people do. And they don't need to be thinking, oh, I'm doing this because data governance tells me I need to do that.
Right. That's
Oh,
right.
that's it's just never like that. It never works that way.
Well, and the reason one reason I like this catalyst and the cubed aspect of it, I'll throw it back over to Bob first, is that as you become more fluent with data, you will appreciate the value of data governance. I mean, you'll learn, oh, that's why we shouldn't just willy-nilly share all this information. Think PII, for example. I mean, there are lots of good tools now that can scan your environment and look for likely PII data, personally identifiable information, phone numbers, social security numbers, things of this nature, and then dynamically tag that. And then you can leverage that on a catalog to get access rights and so on and so forth. That's one of the hows that you do. But the point is, by becoming fluent and becoming more aware of the change management that is intrinsic to data governance and to AI, to jump into that whole topical area, uh, that's why you have these three things together. They coalesce to create an awareness and to basically imbue the responsibility on the user, right, Bob?
Yeah, and I'm really curious to hear what John has to say about the term fluency, because I know he said that he had something to say about that. Fluency, at least in my opinion, equates with confidence.
Hmm.
People can be, you want people to be confident with the data. They need to trust the data. So, Eric, you had mentioned a few times data catalogs and tools like that and metadata management. These are all foundational tools that, organizations are still struggling to this day with even knowing what data they have,
Right.
knowing what's being done with
That's
the
right.
data that they have. So if we are going to get people to be confident in the data, if we are going to get people to be fluent, if we are going to get people to actually, they shouldn't feel like change management is something that's being forced on them. They should understand it as being part of their job.
Right.
And if we can do that, if we can actually then get people to change their data related behavior, it is, I had a friend, Len Silverston. I know John knows
Oh,
Len very
I know Len.
well. Eric, you probably
Hmm.
know him as well. He had said to me many years ago, we just shouldn't call this data governance. We should call it people governance
There you
because it's
go.
people's behavior that's going to make or break the success of governance. Think about it when you're driving down the street the next time and you see a speed limit sign or you see a line down the middle of the road. You know what the right thing is to do.
Yeah.
That's what we need to make data governance kind of feel that it's not, we're not going to assign you new stuff. We're
Hmm.
gonna, you mentioned the word commend.
Right.
We really need to recognize people for what they're already doing and help them to do it better.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
point. John,
just
go ahead.
well, a quick off of that. I have a habit of when I have a company that wants to really get into this, and I say, well, then we need to have or either a data strategy or really get serious about um, taking care of their data resources. I say you need a brand. Okay, a brand is one thing you can anchor change around. Um, and the most common saying or brand or buzzword I've deployed is we're not doing anything new. We're doing existing things a new way.
Hmm.
And that's what we go for. So when everyone says, I don't have time for new things, I go, we're taking the stuff you're doing now that is not helpful and we're going to
Hmm.
fix it into activity that's helpful. But at the end of the day, this should not cost more money. This should
Right.
not take any more time. I
Right.
just wanted to add that to what Bob was talking about.
Mhm.
Well, and ideally, you will identify overlaps or redundancy or gaps. I mean, maybe that's an interesting thread to pull on real quick, Bob. As you go in and consult with organizations and help them improve their use of data and become fluent and be more responsible, you're gonna find things where there are, like I say, overlaps, redundancy. You're doing this, you're doing the same thing, or workflows that are not optimized. Wait a minute, you're cleaning the data and then you're putting it over here and it gets dirty again. These are things that if you just think through them and map it all out, you start to see that stuff. Swim lanes is what my old client used to refer to in the quality space. They have swim lanes and workflows, and you kind of watch this and go, "Oh, we should do it here, not there, or do this upstream, such that we don't have to fix it all down here." I mean, that's one of the more common problems I would tend to think is if you can address something at the provenance, like where it is housed, where it came from, the lineage, and be careful about that before it gets downstream and infects, 18 other different systems. But Bob, what do you think about that?
So what I'm hearing you say is that basically governance is taking place. Okay, your organization's been around 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 250 years. It didn't make it this far, but with a complete lack of governance.
Right. That's
Okay,
fine.
so there is governance, going back to what we talked about before, there is governance that is taking place. Um, I think that when I kind of lost my train of thought. So you want to go back to what
Uh,
the
no,
point of the question was?
that's okay. I mean, we're talking about like how you actually go through the process of improving governance. So you
Well,
find people doing things well. Go ahead.
I think the number one thing that people find out is that there's already a heck of a lot of governance going on. So we need
Hmm.
to recognize where there's governance already taking place. It's not being labeled as governance, so people aren't scared of it as governance, but
Right.
it is governance. Okay,
That's
so that's the I when I was writing this new book, the idea was, okay, things are being done informally already. There's informally, people are defining new data, they're producing new data, they're using the data. If we can just move from being informal to formal, we can also move from being inefficient to efficient.
hmm.
And we can also move from being ineffective to effective. So really what we're doing is we're moving the letter IN, informality. No, we need to formalize. Okay,
Hmm.
Eric, you're the subject matter expert around a certain subject and a certain way that a type of data is being used. Let's not assign you a role. Let's say we recognize you as being the person to go to with that. Let's formalize that. Let's go from informal, everybody didn't know to go to you before, but now they know to go to you if there's a question. Do you want them to come to you? I guess that's another question for another
Right.
day. But going from just formalizing what people already do. Um, and if they're doing it improperly or they're doing it in a way, that's where what John just talked about comes in, where we show them we're getting to the same end. The way that we're getting there is different.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
if it's cost them more money, if it takes more of their time, they're not going to be happy. In this day and age, most often those types of changes they build efficiency, they build effectiveness. We're not looking to move the needle in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. Remove the ins, make ineffective
Just remove
effective,
the ends and go
informal
from
formal,
right, right.
right?
I used that in a presentation the other day and I just thought, you know what? I've been using these three words together. And what's the similarity? Well, it was pretty much right there that
Wow.
I define stewardship as the formalization of accountability for data.
Hmm.
That means that we're formalizing something that was most likely already there. You use the executive team's salaries to create a spreadsheet. I would guess you're responsible for protecting that data.
That's funny.
Just saying,
Responsibility too. I mean, you mentioned auditing. And so, these are real quick. We've got about 90 seconds in this segment. Auditing, compliance, a lot of times compliance will trigger behavior. But real quick, John, you got to look beyond checking the boxes. Like the idea is not just to check the boxes, it's to understand the meaning behind the regulation and embrace that to improve your operations, right? All right, John?
Well, it's accepting that it's real. Um, I got an article coming out with Malcolm Hawker in a few weeks on CDO Magazine on the root cause of why we get stuck.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And the root cause, we did the old five why. We did some serious research. And basically, it comes down to that data in general across businesses or organizations or governments or whatever is still not considered by leadership to be a real thing. Okay?
Wow.
This is as simple as that. As the minute you say it's a real thing that merits some attention and can bring something to bear that proves that, and we have lots of that. And AI is actually helping in that way now. The minute you say that, now you've got their attention. But in general, survey across many hundreds or thousands of data points as you want. Okay. At the end of the day, it's not on their radar. Okay. And if it's not on our radar, it's just something out there. So, I think by calling it data governance, we've made a mistake. We should have called it governing your data.
Hmm.
It means the same thing,
Hmm.
but it implies something different.
It does. You're right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Wow. Good stuff here, folks. We're going to dive into AI next. So don't touch that dial. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back on Inside Analysis with Bob Seiner and John Ladley, two data governance experts. And they've written books, these guys. They write articles. They're doing all kind of stuff. They're working hard to educate the public about the importance of these topics. And AI is now, I'm going to throw this analogy at you, this idea that I had, and would get your take on it first to John and then Bob. I came up with an analogy that AI now, specifically because of Gen AI, is like a final exam that was sprung halfway through the semester. Everyone's like, well, wait, I thought we had a whole semester left. Nope, nope, you got to go. Let's do this thing right now. Let's go, let's go. And
Hmm.
what's going to happen there? Well, be careful, man. I mean, there are already just terrible stories of AI gone awfully, horribly wrong. I think Zillow is one of them where what they automated the pricing, the acquisition and sale of houses, and it
Yeah.
wound up overfitting the model and basically paying way too much in some markets. They lost
Hmm.
like $300 million. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that is a AI governance failure. But what do you
Hmm.
think, John?
Well, I'm going to set the stage briefly before I go into the AI specifically. And that is one of the reasons that we don't have the embracing of and I'm going to, okay, Bob, we want to talk, I'll combine this all together. Fluency. Fluency is still related to if I'm fluent in French, I can speak French, I can listen to French, I can read French. Okay. I can write French. That doesn't make me French. Okay. I'm not a citizen of France. What makes me deeper? What makes me truly French? What makes me gives me a competency at being a French person. Okay. And that's what we miss a lot. And so when I work with folks, I start with fluency and literacy and those things, but I want the organization to be competent in data the same way it's competent with its dollars and cents, its inventory and its HR. And
Mm,
organizations aren't. Competency around data is very isolated and very segmented. Now, that there's also another aspect of data, and this started before AI got big, was with analytics and things like that. And that data is so intrusive. We have these little gadgets, right? Um, and our data can be defined also as the 24/7 record of human existence because everything we do can be captured and
mm,
used and sold and things like that. Because of that, there's now an anthropological aspect to this stuff. It's not just the oversight of the data within the firewall of your organization. There are now societal issues. There are now ethical issues. So, and we were beginning to experience that with analytics when we had bias coming out in models and stuff
mm.
like that. Now,
Interesting. Good point.
now let's talk about those two letters we all know and love these days, the AI. Okay. Um, uh, uh, a, to use AI successfully means, as we've already said, stuffing the right stuff into the LLM. All right. It means having, if you're going to use agentic AI, it means having a good awareness of how a process and a workflow should go because you're going to have a robot doing it. All right. And if you weren't quite sure how your own folks were doing it, well, then just strap in, fella, because the agent's going to come up with something entirely that you weren't expecting. All right. So with AI, to get, and AI is teetering. There's a study I just read yesterday that someone took the MIT study that came out last year and they redid the data and all of this. And a lot of CEOs are saying, no, not now, not now. All right. Um, uh, but it is a powerful tool. I use it. Bob, you use it, right? There's AI governance if it's going to be a corporate thing. And then there's just AI as a productivity thing on individual. That's two things. So when I'm talking AI now, I'm talking about AI as a driver or an enabler of corporate strategy, not productivity tools and not, making a pretty cartoon like what's behind me here. Okay.
Mm,
So so when you do that, yes, you got to have the data right, but what's right? Okay. And it's quality is a good start, but there's some other stuff that we're missing, and that's where the fluency and the acumen comes in. And that's where the anthropological stuff comes in. You need to think about society because of ethics. A lot of what you can do with data with AI is legal.
mm.
A lot of it is not ethical. All right. And we are doing some pretty rude things with AI that's not ethical. All right.
Mhm.
And of course, what is ethical is now becoming a debate because some people say that's ethical, someone won't say that.
Sure.
So that's the one thing. The other thing that we get into with we have the data when we say we're governing data, which is the fuel for the LLM or the agent. That's good fuel, and that fuel's got to be quality. But what about the alignment with business strategy so you know you're being successful? Well, that's data governance too.
Mm.
But there's also the AI governance side. So a lot of organizations say, well, we have AI governance, we don't need data governance. Couldn't be further from the truth. All right.
Right.
A lot of organizations saying, oh, the data governance people, well, the AI department's over here, they're in a lab. You can't talk to them. That's a
Right.
big problem right now.
Right.
All right. That's a terrible mistake as well. Um, the CEO saying, yo, everybody go do AI, and I've seen this, I have seen it, I've seen a copy of the memo. In 2026, I want all department heads doing AI. End of strategy.
Which AI?
Exactly.
Did it specify?
Exactly. Right. So we, so while on top of all this stuff we've been talking about inadequate oversight of a data resource, we are now in the middle of this trillion-of-dollar investment in taking that data, which we have acknowledged we don't do real well, and shoving it into something else where we're going to expect a whole lot more of it.
Where we can't
Obviously,
trust the results of it either, right?
Right.
yeah, and the Zoom metaphor is a very well known, very expensive thing, and there's been a lot more since the Zoom thing several years ago. But there's also some powerful, really good things that can come out of AI, and like anything else, we're letting our fear of doing something slightly different or having to learn something different get in the way of success there. So I'll wrap up my diatribe here with the
Yeah.
fact that AI governance and data governance have to coexist. There is overlap. Organizations must define what their overlap is or is not. Okay. But you cannot have good AI without good fuel, and that fuel requires oversight. And it's not just oversight of the data. There's other things within data governance, such as alignment and the stewardship and accountability for the resources and things like that are also required here. And those all have to be considered before you can even begin to think I can rely on what's coming out of my agent or my LLM.
Hmm.
Okay?
Right. Yeah. No, those are all good points. And to your point, Bob, the models themselves, I mean, I talked to a lot of smart people on these shows, and it was about little over 2 years ago, I had my buddy Usama Fayyad on there. These days, he was one of the guys at Yahoo working on Hadoop years ago. Very, very smart guy, understands data mining. I had him on the show just about little over 2 years ago, and he now runs the Institute for Experiential AI out of Northeastern University, I think it is, in Massachusetts. And his exact quote was, "These models, they're too big. They're not supposed to work. We don't know why they work." Like what? Think about that. The people who built them will tell you they don't know exactly how they work. Well, you can't trust something like that. I mean, that's not good for a deterministic outcome. You can't even govern that. I mean, we have all these RAG models now that people are coming up with, which are sort of trying to put in ex post facto guardrails or buffers, if you will, to kind of protect. But nonetheless, you have to be careful. And I think it's so bizarre. Just about 90 seconds here, Bob. We worked for 50 years on making information systems more efficient, faster, to be able to handle better data, but quality, at least in the database, was never a question. You would always expect to get out from it what you put into it, and now that has all changed. It's like throwing a noise filter on the end of this long, pristine process. But 60-second comment from you, Bob.
It even goes further than that. If you have good quality data, the output that, let's say your data is perfect, the output that you're going to get from AI needs a human in the loop. If not, then you could be. So I saw some meme the other day where somebody said, the car wash is 0.75 miles from my home. Should I drive there?
Right.
And the AI response is, no, you lazy bum. It's only 0.7 miles. You should walk there. Not taking into, the data is all right. I don't know if that's a great example,
It's
but
beautiful because some
even if
idiot's
the
going to go
data
to
is all right, yeah, he's going to walk down the street. But,
and
but I mean,
get themselves a shower.
exactly. So, but I'm just saying that even if the data is exactly right, which has always been the goal for so long, we need a human in the loop
Yeah,
when it comes to
absolutely.
AI because that behavior, and again, in the last segment, we could talk about behavior again,
Yeah,
but if it's people's behavior in AI,
that's right.
it's not letting AI make decisions for you.
Yeah,
It
be
can cost
careful.
you a lot of money.
Don't
Be
don't
careful.
touch that dial.
Right.
I'll be right back with the podcast bonus segment. Stand by. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on Inside Analysis, a bit of a lightning round. John, I'll throw it over to you. I'm already seeing this, that there is this remarkable backlash about AI
Yeah,
with my kids
yeah.
saying, "Oh, that's AI, Dad." And like even the kids, and then my kid is also saying, "Oh, Dad, it's killing all the animals because it's using all the water." I'm like, okay, I don't think it's actually killing any animals or it's using all the water, but I understand that there are resource
Yeah,
constraints around AI data
right.
centers.
Yeah.
But there is a real concern here because as we know in the data business, if a business user gets bad data, they're not going to trust that system anymore. It just habit. Trust is very difficult to earn back once it's been
Hmm.
broken. So
No.
Right.
what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that's one of this thing I read yesterday, and I skimmed it, set it aside. I wish I could remember where it came from, but it used the MIT study and a few other studies, and this is happening now. All right. So, again, I work with a lot of executives. You put yourself in their shoes. They've seen the data warehouse wave. They've seen the client server wave. They've seen the software
Right.
engineering wave. IT has been letting them down for 40 years. All right. Okay. And they're smart and they know they need technology, but they also don't trust IT at all. All right.
Right.
None. All right. So now here comes AI and they do a few things and they go, well, look, we make cars. And what does it say we should make next year? The AI says we should make a chicken. Or, well, obviously that's incorrect, and the AI is stupid. And how much did this cost me? And what am I getting for it? And it's becoming like any other business thing. Is there a return on the investment? And can my culture deal with it? And all of that. And we're getting into those same things. So it's going to go through its trough of disillusionment for
Right.
sure.
Right.
Okay. So that's what I think of that. Well, that was your question. What do I think of that? I think we're due for a dip. We're due for a big reset here, but it's not unlike anything else going. He's talking about his book. I just will be releasing soon, not a book, but a whole set of stuff, material around something called a data playbook, where if you say the word data in the corporate boardroom, you've got to refer to the playbook to make sure you're saying the right words.
Hmm.
All right,
Okay.
because it doesn't matter whether it's data governance, data management, data strategy, business intelligence, data warehouse. There's a set of consistent patterns that organizations don't do. And when they don't hit those patterns right, they have the exact same result,
Right.
which is not favorable.
Bob, I'm going to throw this one over to you, and this is one of my fun uh, epiphanies over the years. There's an old expression, hear all, believe half. And what I've learned
That's
within media
generous. That's
is
generous.
right is people will say, for example, oh, I know not to trust everything I've heard in the media, but they still trust everything they've heard in the media. It's the stuff that you've heard that's wrong, right? And my concern with data now and with AI in particular is that you are going to have people saying, yeah, I know not to trust it, but they're going to trust it anyway, whatever it says, and they're just going to roll with that. And I think that's an interesting challenge to tackle because all the data governance in the world isn't going to help you if you've got a probabilistic system on the end of that pipeline spitting out your answers. But what do you think?
Well, the example I just gave, with the taking your car or leaving your car at home when you go for a car wash. I mean, the data can all be good. It's the problem of people interpreting the same data different ways is
Interesting.
not a new problem.
Right.
Okay, it
That's right.
is, and I don't want to, we won't bring politics into this, but the whole idea of just there being data, just because it's data doesn't mean it's true. I don't
Hmm.
know how many places, have me listed as being 8'3". I'm not 8'3". I'm only 8 foot 1.5. Come on, don't. No, but I'm just saying that just because something is recorded as data, just because it falls into the guidelines, the parameters, the guide rails
Hmm.
for that data. I think the AI governance is more around the perception and the use of the data that's coming out of AI. I mean,
Mm.
data governance is certainly the inputs and maybe
Hmm.
some of the throughputs. It's the outputs that if they're left to be governed on their left to be ungoverned, if we have agents just making decisions without there being again, I'll use the term human in the loop, we're in for a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I mean, I think that the AI is not going to go away.
right.
I mean, it is here. What we need to do, and this is just going to take the whole conversation full circle, is we got to bring it back to people's behavior.
Hmm.
They have to know if they're fluent. And the word I held up while John was talking about fluency is the word culture. It
Hmm.
doesn't make you French to be able to read or write but if you know the culture,
Yep.
and I think that has a lot to do with it as well. So,
Interesting.
change management, I mean, we're going to get people to change their behavior. It's one of those things is going to be to not trust everything that they see or hear or read anymore because, you have to be smart enough to discern what you can use and how it can be used.
It
Which
has
I
to be
think,
something that comes into a conversation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right now,
Well,
data doesn't come into a conversation. If you read about some executive and they cook the books, oh, they'll talk about it at the country club for weeks. All right. Someone cooked the book, somebody embezzled, someone got caught by an audit, someone got caught by this. The only time you see something on data is that there's a breach.
man,
Because
that's what a good point.
okay, but what I'm going to say is, our we ran a data quality scan, and 25% of our customers have the wrong address or something. That's not going to make the 6 o'clock news. But until it makes the day in day out conversation, um, to Bob's point, the people side is weak, and AI just expands the scope of that into cross organization, cross cultural,
Yeah.
and it makes it even bigger. I know you're going to come back to something else here, but to tack on what Bob said, we're going to see a lot more expansion of the people issue than just your internal cultures. We're going to see an expansion here bigger than that, connected with data and the uses of data.
Yeah. Well, and I'll close with something Bob was hinting at. Critical thinking. I saw a comedian the other day who was really funny.
Uh,
She did this whole bit. She's like, "Oh, guys, I don't even know if I can talk about this, but like way back when I was your age, in like the 80s and 90s, we would do this thing. It was crazy. It was called critical thinking, where we would like listen to what this person said, then listen to what that person said,
and then
then we'd make up our own mind."
But now one of
that's
those things
crazy talk. That's
one
crazy talk.
one of those things that are giving you their opinion are AI now. It's
Right.
pulling its data and
That's right.
it interprets it that 3/4 of a mile you should walk it. Don't take your car
Right.
to the car wash. It's crazy.
Critical
Yeah.
thinking. Take it with a grain of salt. Well, folks, look these gentlemen up online. I look at this book, The Data Catalyst Cubed by Robert Seiner, aka Bob. And of course, John Ladley's coming out with some stuff as well. Look them up on LinkedIn. They're all over the
And
place.
a podcast, Rock Bottom
And
Data Feed, the Rock
Rock
Bottom
Bottom
Data
Data
Feed,
Feed. There you go. It's entering
Yeah.
season 3, I understand.
season
So
3. Yes.
that's good stuff. And with that, we'll bid you farewell, folks. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.